everyone. So welcome to another Facebook Live. I'm Teah, and this is Sierra. So we figured today we would debunk some coffee myths. So there are a lot of, there's a lot of different information out there. So we made a cup full of suggestions and myths from fans and just from the stuff that Sierra encounters every day, keeping her ear to the ground with her fan base. So we'll jump right into it. Do you want to do the first one?
Sure do. Let's see here. Alright, this is a good one. Should you refrigerate or freeze your coffee, and will it keep it fresh?
So yeah, this is kind of a gray area a little bit, I think. So with the freezing coffee, I personally tell people, if you're not going to use it for a while, put it in the freezer, but make sure it's sealed really well. The Death Wish bags work fine.
I'd say unopened, freezing your coffee is okay. Once it's open, though, you probably wouldn't want to put it back in the freezer because condensation can build up. It can kind of change the structure of the coffee beans, and it can ruin things like the overall aroma and flavor profile.
Yeah, and I never tell people to put it in the fridge because it just dries it out. What about you?
I would keep it probably in a dark space and a cooler space. Coffee will stay fresher when it's cooler, but I'd say room temperature right around there is a solid spot.
That sounds right, as long as it's not in a hot area necessarily.
Yeah.
Another thing was light that I've heard. And so I don't think that's the biggest concern is having the light not hit it, but if you ever have your coffee in the sunlight or anything in the sunlight, you kind of do see that it gets a little bit lighter. And I've never experienced that being a better cup of coffee, so.
Yeah, it's convenient that our bags are black.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And foil gusseted.
Yeah, the foil gusset is great, and the valve is great too because it only allows air to go out and not in, so that's helpful. Sometimes you'll get, sometimes we get this coffee shipped back to us from the distribution center, and it's a brick of beans. Have you seen that? It's like a really dense brick of beans, and that's just because all the coffee, all of the oxygen went out of it. And it hasn't gotten back in, which is a good thing. So if you ever get one of those bricks, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Don't use it as a weapon.
And don't use it as a weapon. Myth busted. All right, moving on here. Let's see. Here's another myth. Let's see. Okay, here's one I like. Coffee that goes through the digestive system of a small animal is a delicacy. So what's the name of that coffee?
Kopi Luwak.
So Kopi Luwak coffee is essentially farmed by small mammals called civets, eating coffee and then pooping it out, basically. And, it doesn't make the coffee taste better. I think it's like a few $100s per pound. And it's really cruel, right? It's like a really cruel, kind of abusive way to farm coffee. Completely unnecessary.
I'm sure it depends, who you're sourcing it from, but in some cases it can be very inhumane, like shock treatment and force feeding. It's ugly. Yeah. It's ugly.
So basically they lock these animals in cages and force feed them, coffee cherries, and then, and that's just not great nutritional value. Coffee cherries are good and delicious, but obviously that's not enough nutrients to sustain a small animal. So, I wouldn't personally spend $300 on a pound of poop coffee.
You could do that at home. You could.
All right, debunked. Let's do this.
Okay. Robusta coffee is by default poor quality coffee.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Recently the SCAA has actually started inducting certain Robusta coffees into the Specialty Coffee Association. So, most of the time it's not as good as an Arabica bean. It's a more organic coffee. It kind of grows on its own without much cultivation. But recently they've started cultivating it and really paying attention to it, and I think it's gotten a lot better. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone's have you ever tried like just plain Robusta coffee without any?
I can't say I have. From what I've heard, that Arabica coffee will naturally have a fuller flavor profile than Robusta. Robusta has a higher caffeine content.
Right.
And in some cases, Robusta is often cheaper to buy, which is why a lot of blends will use it just kind of as a filler.
Right. Right. Yeah, so, yeah, I think the reason it's cheaper, and it actually usually is organic too, I think. Just by default, all Robusta coffee is organic, but it's almost impossible to have USDA certified organic, even though it's all organic because, again, it grows in the wild, so having, like, those certifications in place is tough, just with it being, wildly grown in the mountains of, the coffee belt. So, I wouldn't say by nature or by default it's bad, but a lot of it isn't as good as your, grade A Arabica beans.
Yeah, it's all about the blend, and for brewing like espresso, I mean, Robusta is great with that high caffeine.
Exactly, and a lot of espresso blends actually do have Robusta in it, just for the extra kick of caffeine and that kind of that little punch in the face, and that's a lot of the reason we have it as a blend in Death Wish too. So it is, our coffee isn't completely Robusta, but it is a mix of Arabica and Robusta, as we know.
Sweet beans.
Sweet beans. All right.
Go for it.
Thanks. Yes. All right. Let's see. If espresso has present crema, it is quality espresso. So, what is crema? So it's a byproduct of espresso. And it's like the little foam that you see on top of a shot of espresso. And I see it and I get excited, like when I see it. And it's, chances are, if your espresso has crema, it has a higher chance of it being a good quality espresso, but it's all about the way it tastes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the crema is what sticks in the back of your throat when you are drinking an espresso, and that's what you really taste. That's why it's so strong, and it almost does have that bitter taste. It's because the crema is so so pungent, and sometimes in a good way if you enjoy that. But I wouldn't say it's a definitive indication of a good espresso.
Yeah, I think as a barista, when you're learning how to pull shots and when you are pulling shots, crema is just one of those exterior factors that you look for and kind of strive for.
Yeah, it's just like, it's almost like latte art.
It's satisfying.
Yes, it definitely is. Definitely is. Debunked, kind of. Let me read another one here. Let's see. Your water should be boiling hot when you make your coffee.
No.
So I think the internet has done a pretty good job of coaching people about, not boiling your coffee, or boiling it and waiting. How long do you think?
So when you are heating up water for your coffee, you can let it boil, but once it reaches that boiling temperature, you want to let it cool down for around 30 seconds. Depending on the brewing method that you're using, you could be using a water temperature anywhere from, I think, about 195 degrees to 205.
Right.
That's kind of the sweet spot where you want your water to be before you start, doing a pour over or using your AeroPress.
Interesting. And it's strange because at the Specialty Coffee Association, when they're actually cupping coffee, they grind the coffee a little bit more coarse than even a French press. So they use a special grinder to, take it a step more coarse than, a typical Chemex or French press. And they actually do use the boiling water to test it. But apparently that pulls out, the distinctive bad characteristics of it on purpose. So you almost have a worse tasting cup of coffee for the purpose of weeding out, poor quality coffee.
Right. Okay.
So that's another reason you don't want it boiling, because it will pull out those, little nuances that you just don't want.
Yeah.
So don't brew your coffee with boiling water. Oh, thanks. Nice. You want to read this one?
Sure. Thank you. If coffee is organic, that means it's good coffee.
Okay. I mean, it depends on what you want in your cup. If you're a solely organic drinker, I'd say that's definitely a plus for coffee. But as far as taste goes, I don't think it's
subjective.
Yeah, for sure.
Personally, I always look for food and coffee that is certified organic and fair trade as well. But in terms of flavor profile and roast, I think that is something that's totally up to the person that's drinking it and brewing it.
For sure. And, we just talked about the whole Robusta thing and how that is just organic by nature, and a lot of Robusta isn't very good. So I think that kind of answers the question. You know, if the coffee is organic, you know, it's good in the sense of the subjective version of the word, where you can kind of take your opinion, but I wouldn't say it's good quality necessarily.
Right.
Great. All right, let's see. You can become immune to caffeine, and that one's from Tom B. He's a very avid Death Wish fan, so hi Tom, thank you for the suggestion. So yeah, caffeine tolerance. Let's talk about that a little bit. I know personally I can become not immune necessarily, but more tolerant to caffeine if I'm drinking just a ton of it every day. So sometimes I take tolerance breaks, like on a Sunday afternoon. It's tough, but it's nice to kind of go back into the week with a nice low tolerance. I'm not sure about you. Have you experienced that at all?
I think one of the funniest parts of when I started working here was my first day. I had never tried the coffee before, and I drank at least 1 cup of it, and I think the caffeine overload for me actually knocked me out. I mean, by 5 p.m. I was struggling.
Now this is coming from you, who did the caffeine challenge on our Facebook Live last week.
Now that I drink coffee every day, I mean, I usually I'll find that after I've been drinking coffee all week, by Friday I'm drinking at least a few cups a day. Whereas Monday, when I've had that refreshing weekend, I'm good with 1 cup.
But I will say, drinking Death Wish has been better for me as far as that goes. So, you know, whereas my tolerance would kind of stop at, I'd say I could drink probably 8 or 9 cups of regular coffee a day and be fine. But with Death Wish, luckily that helps with the tolerance. So I've had to take less, you know, a smaller amount of tolerance breaks with Death Wish.
You cut back cup-wise on how many you drink. I mean, my pound of coffee will last much longer at home than it would if it was another blend. So.
Right. So I wouldn't say that we debunked this, but, you know, we kind of cleared it up a little bit. There we go.
Insight. All right. Okay. Another one about espresso. Only espresso roast should be used in an espresso maker.
I love to tear into this myth. I don't know about you. But, alright. Espresso is not a blend. It's a brewing process. So, you can make espresso with any bean. You can make it with any coffee bean. But there are some coffees that are ideal for espresso. Ideally a mix, as we went into before, about, you know, the Arabica and Robusta mix. So, typically a darker roast with a mix of the 2 kinds of beans work best, but there's absolutely no such thing as a espresso blend or an espresso coffee. It's simply a brewing process.
Yeah, and I think when you find blends that are labeled as an espresso roast, that really just means that they are one of those blends out there that are ideal for brewing with an espresso machine.
Definitely.
And with the Death Wish, I mean, it's a dark roast, and it has that blend of Arabica and Robusta, so it's perfect.
Right. And the Valhalla Java is pretty good for espresso too. It's a little bit lighter, but it's got, I think, 5 different coffee varietals, so that's always nice to pull out of an espresso machine because you just get so many different flavors. And pulling a light roast out of it, I can see why people don't do it because it's very acidic. It's like a lemon drop. Right. So if you ever pull a really light coffee through an espresso machine, it really is just like an acid bomb. And it's good, and if you like that kind of thing, it works. But I can see why, you know, an espresso blend has become pretty popular. So, debunked-ish.
Coffee sobers you up.
Yeah, a couple people ask this.
That is a dangerous thing to think.
It's absolutely not true at all. So you might think you're a little bit more sober, but like other drugs, you will feel like you're a little bit more sober, but you're just not. You're not at all more sober, and actually it's worse because coffee, you know, it'll raise your heart rate and it will make you more confident, but you'll be just as incompetent to drive or do other things. I will say it's not particularly dangerous to mix them, as long as it's not in crazy amounts, but yeah, absolutely does not sober you up.
Drink some water and wait it out.
Yeah, don't take a chance. Coffee will not help you. just don't drink and drive. I think the first time I really experienced this question was when we started collaborating with Old Saratoga Brewery, and we had so much fun at those events, but, we would offer the coffee samples to our fans, and they'd say, oh, no, we'll wait till the end of the, event so we can drive, and I would just immediately say, no, that is absolutely not true. We always kind of play into the jokes, but that's just not something to joke around about, so coffee does not sober you up. Moving on.
Debunked.
Totally debunked.
How about, while we're on that quickly,
Yeah.
Coffee helps a hangover? Do we know anything about that?
I would personally say yes. I don't know the science behind that one. I don't know about you, but especially people who drink coffee with cream and sugar, it makes sense because you get a little bit of sugar and a little bit of fat, which is always great for a hangover. Anything in your stomach is great for a hangover. So I personally do like the coffee on the day after.
Coffee and bagel?
Coffee and a bagel. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, part of it is probably the fat and the sugar that people are putting inside of the coffee, but obviously the caffeine helps headaches.
And it's a mood enhancer, so
yeah,
when you're grumpy.
So yeah, definitely. I would definitely say that. Awesome. All right. Death Wish coffee has the most caffeine. Yeah, I would say so. There have been, so here's the interesting thing. Our brewing ratio is recommended by the SCAA, and it is on the high end. So a lot of people do say, "Oh, is that because of your brewing ratio?" And it isn't, because if you brew Death Wish coffee the same way as you brew any coffee, you'll get more caffeine, and you'll get a stronger flavor, and just the overall strength of the coffee is the highest that's out there. So I'm glad that was asked.
Yeah, I like to phrase it where you could use that SCAA ratio on a normal store-bought blend, and it will make it a little bit stronger. But in terms of flavor profile, it's going to make it very bitter. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be enjoyable. Whereas our blend, it's incredibly strong, and in addition to that, it's smooth and it tastes awesome.
Awesome. Confirmed.
And if you want to enter a contest about our coffee being the strongest.
So right now we do have a contest on our blog about, and we're just getting from fans what makes Death Wish coffee the strongest for you, whether it's the caffeine content or the flavor content or just the strength of that skull and crossbones on your bag or on your mug. Submit a 5 to 10 to 20 second video about what makes Death Wish coffee the strongest to you, and that's right on our blog. So feel free to check that out after the video, or during. That's fine.
And I think when you enter, you have a chance to get a Chemex bundle, right?
Yeah.
And a chance to be in our next commercial.
Yeah. So that video would in part be part of our next commercial that's coming out. So that'll be that's kind of a fun video to do, for sure.
Alrighty. Cold brew is higher in caffeine, asked by David A.
Yeah, so that's another kind of gray area question, I think, where cold brew is typically brewed to be a condensed version of a coffee where you can dilute it with water. That way you can make a bunch of coffee up front and then dilute it as you will. So I would say, typically a cold brew would have more caffeine in it at the recipe before dilution.
Right, because when you're brewing it, you're pretty much brewing it as a concentrate, especially with some methods that last up to about 24 hours.
Right.
The coffee just being processed with water. And so I think it depends on how much you choose to dilute it.
Right. So I think really the underlying question there would be, does heat destroy caffeine? And that's no. So heat doesn't destroy caffeine in the brewing process whatsoever. So you'd need to have it at roasting temperatures to even begin to disturb the caffeine content at all. So if you brew with the same ratios with hot water as you do cold water, I'd say it'd be the same caffeine content.
Nice.
Great.
I'm a little excited there.
It's the coffee. All right. This is a good question, or a good myth, let's say. Oily beans are better. I've heard a lot of different opinions on, or I should say myths or opinions on oily beans. I've heard some people say that oily beans are better. I've heard them say that oily beans have gone bad. So I would say that oily beans are simply a distinction on how long the coffee was roasted. So a darker roast would typically have more oil than a light roast. You'll find that with Death Wish coffee, for sure. But I wouldn't say it's an indication of good coffee or bad coffee or spoiled coffee or anything like that.
Yeah, a lot of customers will reach out, especially when it's their first order with us, with a concern about how much oil is on the beans. It's just something they haven't seen before, and that's probably because they're used to drinking a different roast. And the oil is released, I think, past the second crack during the roasting process. And because we're a dark roast, that's when a roast becomes a dark roast, past the second crack. So I think with ours, it is a good sign to see oily beans in your bag. If your beans aren't oily and you're drinking Death Wish, it's possible that the bag's not fresh, to which you'd want to reach out to us at customer service.
And we'd happily replace it.
Yeah.
So, great. All right. Pick one in there.
Coffee stains your teeth, from Tom D. Unfortunately, coffee does stain your teeth, but there are definitely ways to work around it. Flossing every day, every morning, every night. And I personally, I will swish my coconut oil in my mouth after I brush my teeth for just a couple minutes. And it's, I think, an old Asian preventative technique for oral care.
Oh, interesting.
And it does whiten your teeth.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I've recommended, take a sip of coffee, take a sip of water.
Yeah, that's
kind of a thing, because it's more of the longevity. Also, avoiding very harsh chemicals on your teeth, like white strips. So those white strips will make your teeth white initially, but they'll actually also make your teeth more porous. And so when you drink the coffee, it just kind of settles in there a little bit more. So, frequent trips to the dentist, swishing water after flossing, as you mentioned, and the coconut oil trick. That's interesting.
It's called oil pulling.
Oil pulling. Oh, right. I think I've heard that a little bit. But it's interesting to hear the background on it. So, yep, it does. It stains your teeth, unfortunately, but I'd say the trade-off is pretty good for that.
Worth it.
Worth it. Sweet. Let's see. What do we got in here? Acidic coffee is better than bitter coffee.
I think acidity is something that's often found in a lighter roast, brighter, fruitier coffees, whereas a dark roast, you can sometimes sense that bitterness. And bitterness is a good thing when it's balanced with the rest of the flavor profile. If you have a bitter cup of coffee and it's just kind of overtaking the whole cup, I would say some tips to keep in mind would be that your coffee maybe has been over extracted. In that case, you probably want to play around with your grind a little bit, maybe make it a little more coarse. Or that also goes into using water that's too hot. You would want it. Bitterness can come out of
conversation stems from what is called, the third wave of coffee, and that essentially is, sometimes you'll go to a coffee shop and they'll only have light roast coffees, and it's an interesting kind of informational experience that you'll have where they'll tell you, oh, light roasts are good. That's the only kind of good coffee. And it's an interesting conversation to have because, you've got the light roast coffees that are from, your African countries, and, they're typically lighter roasted. And so the third wave of coffee is an interesting subject. And so as a company that produces a dark roast, we often do have to explain, taste is subjective. You like what you like. I typically like all kinds of coffee. So yeah, I wouldn't say an acidic light roast coffee is better than a dark roast unless that is what you like. So yeah, I think we went through that pretty thoroughly.
We get a lot of good things that come in through our surveys and everything, where there are people that really can't drink coffee, or they're directed not to drink coffee, but they can drink ours because it is lower in acidity, and that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people do think a stronger coffee would have more acid, but that's absolutely not true depending on what the coffee is. So strength and acidity have nothing to do with each other. It has everything to do with the shade of the coffee, where lighter roasts have more acid, darker roasts are on the more bitter side, but that can be controlled in the ways that you mentioned earlier. So,
boom.
Let's do one. We'll do one more. We're about almost at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We just went through that one a little bit. Actually, that might be a good one to do. So light roast has more caffeine than dark roast.
That's a good one to finish off on.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll take 2 steps back. A lot of people would originally think that a dark roast would have more caffeine, and then it came out that light roasts actually have more caffeine. But really neither is true. It's actually, if you take the same bean and roast them to different shades, the difference is negligible, but it's all based on either weight or volume. So if you're measuring your coffee by weight, the lighter roast will have more caffeine just because they're a denser bean. But if you're doing it by volume, since the darker roasts are larger, you'll get more caffeine like that. So that's an interesting conversation, kind of. So yeah, I mean, it all depends on, it more so depends on the varietal. It depends on the roasting process just slightly. So you can't really cook the caffeine out of a coffee. But there are things you can do during the roasting process, which is a part of our secret here at Death Wish, having to do with our caffeine. So that's pretty much that. All right, well, looks like we're pretty much out of myths for now, but we're happy to answer any questions in the comment section. So drop your comments right below. This has been so much fun. We love talking about coffee, so you can always shoot customer service a message, and they're happy to talk about it too. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in with us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.